Awesome. And we're live on YouTube. Thank you everybody again for joining another Open RFC call. Apologize for getting a few minutes, getting started a few minutes late. Today's date is June 17th, Wednesday, June 17th. Just for a quick update, this is usually the time slot for the RFC deep dive, which is my, I think the meeting invite isn't standardized yet across the two alternating call times. So apologize for folks that had some confusion there. I'm going to try to resolve that going forward and try to just have a singular point of reference for people to know and have in their calendars. Quickly, we'll be following along in the as the agenda states in issue 166 in the npm RFCs repo. I'm going to copy and paste the hackmd file for folks to add themselves as attendees. And just a quick couple housekeeping notes. These calls and all communication that we have in the npm org and in the RFCs repo itself is covered under a code of conduct. There's a reference there in the npm RFCs repo itself. Please read it. The gist here is that we would really like folks to be mindful, and if you want to be share your opinion, please raise your hand. And just be kind and thoughtful to folks when they're speaking. Desired outcomes of this call is essentially to help move forward RFCs, give the community an extra channel and a means of communicating with the npm team, and ideally, make some progress and discuss items that are important, including the RFCs themselves. We have a smaller agenda today, but I want to also quickly acknowledge some new folks that have actually sort of joined the ranks. I want to maybe give Miles, who most folks I think know on this call, an opportunity to say hi and maybe explain a bit about some changes that he's had in his personal life and maybe why he's joining today in this call. You want to do a quick introduction, Miles?
Yeah, sure. Hi, I'm Miles. Some of you may recognize me from such open source projects as node.js. I recently joined GitHub last week as a product manager. I'm going to have a variety of different focuses, but my primary and immediate focus is supporting the NPM team. This encompasses, the CLI and the registry. Be helping with kind of broad product direction and strategy. And the way I've been trying to present the role is kind of just as a broad support. I'm trying my best not to come in and own anything or just come in trying to change everything all at once. But I definitely have, some direction to go through and audit things, get up to speed on things, make suggestions on improvements that I think we could do. I selfishly also have, my own small product things I'd love to see happen, better support for package exports and stuff like that I'm sure my bias will show pretty quickly. I'll also be working across a variety of other products from GitHub, including, actions and packages, maybe pages, kind of anything that has to do with the end-to-end experience for a developer. Sitting down and getting productive with GitHub. I'm still going to be active in Node and OpenJS and TC39, so a lot of my general open source contributions should not change too much, although you'll notice I'll be starting to make some more time specifically for stuff like the npm RFC process and places where I haven't been involved too much. One commitment that I made earlier today to the npm team that I would love to make to the broader community and the people who are on this call is that I very much am coming in a support capacity, and I'm not trying in any way to shove my weight around or trying to enforce things that don't have broad consensus or buy-in. So, if you have any direct feedback to give me about the way that I'm engaging, because these are new spaces that I'm working in, please feel free to bring that to me. I recognize a number of people on this call who already know a way to get a hold of me privately. But most of my information is available on either my Twitter, where my DMs are open, or if you go to my website and you sleuth just a tiny bit, you can find my email. So just feel free to reach out with any feedback, positive or negative, and very happy to just kind of engage in the process.
Yeah, I know we're excited to have you, and it's great to see you on these calls now. So, yeah, it's exciting. So, another quick, claps in chat. Another quick announcement or update for folks. I know this has come up quickly. The OpenJS Collab Summit and the OpenJS World is happening next week. I know a number of folks here also are in the various node.js working groups. I know there's a package maintenance working group session, which I think Wes will be there. I will be there for sure. I know that Miles is actually running also, I think you're doing a talk next week. I'm going to try to be running a workshop for essentially a broad scope contributing to NPM session. So there's a number of and actually next week I think we'll probably be skipping this call in lieu of doing essentially a OpenJS that coordinates with Collab Summit. So the agenda I think is still being I'm not sure if it's completely finalized. I know that Jory had posted a PR for that draft, but I think it's almost completely solid in concrete right now. So I'll make sure to post that or add this to the meeting notes if possible, just so everybody knows where we'll be next week and the different touch points we'll have. I'm pretty excited. It's unfortunate that we can't be together and in the same space together to collaborate, as is often the case, to hopefully change up the way that we interact, because we're already virtual pretty much 90% of the time with each other. So that's unfortunate, but I'm excited to dedicate some time next week to try to tackle problems for NPM and Node and the community at large. So
Darcy, if I can just
okay.
add,
yeah,
because I think that PR has been merged already, and I think the regular Open RFC session, which is going to be a part of the summit, is going to be on the 26th June at 3 p.m. US Central Time. So that info is already merged in the awesome. Summit, and it should be available on the website, I guess.
Awesome. What I'll do and take as an action item is to add that to our public events calendar, which is already, if folks have already been using that, we'll try to keep that up to date for now. In the long term, that may not be the source of truth going forward. As I mentioned at the beginning of the call, I know it's been tough and a bit confusing to figure out which link to jump on. And there's been some changes in the back end here. So yeah, ideally we'll standardize that, and I'll try to communicate through the RFC's repo. Thanks for the link, Wes. That's great. Cool. Anybody else? Does anybody have any other announcements or want to make any other introductions? Maybe David.
Sure, I can introduce myself. So I'm David from Spain, working in Adidas as a JavaScript developer. So I've been working as a JavaScript developer for like 6 years, something like this. And not much else to say. I'm glad to see my RFC here and hope it can be useful. I think that some people already found this, not useful right now because they cannot use it like that, like it is. But I think a lot of people have the same struggle. And even with workspaces from other solutions that they have probably tried, have faced this problem where you want to maybe focus with just one part of your workspace, and you still have to do a lot of work installing all dependencies for everything. So yeah, we should maybe discuss this now when we start.
For sure. I appreciate you jumping on. I know we poked you last minute there. So, yeah. So again, the agenda is listed in the HackMD file. Feel free again, if you haven't added yourself to the attendees, you can do that there. The first item, and just want to give folks time before we jump in. Was there any other announcements? No? Okay. Well, jumping into the first item, PR number 150. Essentially, yeah, David, would you like to go into the details here of the RFC in terms of adding file and pack protocols?
Yeah, sure. So this comes as an idea when we are working with large repositories, which are usually managed by workspaces, either Yarn workspaces, Lerna, or any other kind of workspace tool. Usually we have to download all the dependencies. Never, it doesn't mind if we just want to work with just one package or a couple of packages which are actually linked, which means that we have to spend a lot of time installing. In one of our cases, we have a monorepo which is using like 26 or something like that packages which are in the workspace. So that's a lot of dependencies when we want to work with it. So if I would like to focus only on a specific package, I would rather just rebuild or install all the dependencies that are actually linked to my package. This is one of the things that probably can be achieved with just linking the packages with the existing file protocol. But the thing is, we are missing a couple of issues that we have. One is dependency hoisting. Sometimes with the actual file protocol, hoisting of dependencies is not triggered correctly. Like for instance, with one of the examples I created, we have a dependency on one package, which is like a common set of building tools, which includes TypeScript. So when we install the dependencies by just normal linking, the TypeScript dependency is in the node modules of that package, but it's not hoisted to the top package, which will be normally done if it was just a dependency which is coming from NPM, right? That's one of the problems. And the other problem is we actually want to build, and if we have any distributables in those packages, right? We don't want to first install, link, and then go through each and every one of those packages, building the JavaScript or TypeScript or whatever, so we can later start using the root package, so as to say. So I started looking at it and thought that we have already the pack functionality, the package script, which is combining everything into a package, which is already the deliverable that we will have in NPM. And when we are linking this package through a tarball directly into the root package, it behaves just like an NPM module, right? Just as it should. So having this for linked packages within our working directory or our workspace is the behavior that we will expect to be having. And the problem is that if we just go through each of the packages and tarball and then link, it's much more costly than if we had it automated in a way. So this file plus pack is trying to aim for that. So whenever you depend on any other package in your local and you want to do some process to build it, then you are able to trigger the pack script, do any kind of job like compiling with TypeScript, compiling with Webpack or whatever, and then bring it all together to the root package.
Interesting. Has anybody else had a chance to look through this? Or how are you solving this today again, David, with the reference?
Right now, we are not solving it. We are relying on the workspace tools that we have. So if we are working with Yarn, this means we have to do all the installs, then run the build script through all the workspaces that actually have build script. And it takes a while. And sometimes we just don't want this. Or if a developer is working with a monorepo in his local machine, they need to go through all this installing of dependencies, building of dependencies, when maybe they just need very minimal subset of those. And
it's a question. Do you also have experience using Lerna? Will it like run all this pack steps as part of the bootstrapping of Lerna?
I'm not sure about that, to be honest. I think it shouldn't. I don't think it's actually packing anything, because it actually symlinks everything together. And then if you want, you can run a build script through all the workspaces. So probably it's not running any pack or anything else.
I'm pretty sure it's not. Last time I mean, it's been.
They don't run pre-pack, or Wes, do you know?
I don't think so. I think it's just doing the linking. It's been a while, so I wouldn't take that as a definitive answer. But when we used Lerna on one of the projects I worked on maybe a year ago, we ended up having to write a script that just went through and did all the pre-builds. So I was going to ask, I feel the pain of this, but I hesitate to think the solution should be a new protocol. I'm not saying I disagree with that. I just, we've already got workspaces being worked on. That's a weird way to say that, but workspaces are in the works. And what would be the difference that adding a protocol here, what would be the big win? Is it just running the scripts there? Because then it seems like we could just add a workspace prepack or, whatever, a command that does the behavior we want without necessarily having to introduce a new protocol to get the same end result, right?
Yeah, and that's actually one of the questions that I had. If you're going to work with workspaces, will you be able to focus and maybe say, okay, I want to work with this workspace and its dependencies, so you don't have to install all the dependencies of all the workspaces? If we could do this, I'm not sure if we could also maybe run a script which is focused only on the root package plus its dependencies, but then it will solve this problem at all. So we wouldn't need a new protocol. But I think that even if you don't want to use workspaces, maybe you have a very small project that really don't feel like managing with workspaces. I don't know. We already have the file protocol. If this file protocol is just doing the linking, maybe it's not so useful for you. So I think it could be maybe even an improvement on top of the existing file protocol.
So for what it's worth, I've actually found the file protocol, since it changed behavior, to be almost useless.
Agree.
I never use it. We used to have, my whole last company, our entire setup was based on file protocol things. And as soon as y'all changed that, it broke it. And I left the company a long time ago. So, who knows? But not having a replacement that actually copies the files over has been, unfortunate to me. So if we, and that's where maybe I say, again, a protocol is one way, but also just bringing back the old behavior behind a flag would possibly resolve the same user experience problems we're experiencing without necessarily adding a new protocol.
Yeah, it seems like a good solution to me, actually.
So, and Roy, you might want to speak to this in terms of the work that you're doing with the subcommands RFC, which also has in it, I think, filtering for workspaces, which might speak to David's notes there. And then in terms of how we would be implementing something like npm pack that is workspace aware, I'm fairly positive we will be running lifecycle events appropriately. So if Learn It Today isn't, that is something that, for each one of these items that I think you're trying to solve for, David, I think that we might have existing conversations going on to try to solve for, and maybe Roy, you can speak to at least the workspace aspect of that.
Sure. Yeah. It's one of the conversations we're going to have today about running the subcommands. And one important part of the proposal there is having the ability to filter for a specific workspace, or you can also define groups of workspaces. Hey, Arta.
Hey, everyone.
Hello. So just to wrap up, I also checked Lerna. I've been digging a lot in the work of workspaces to also consulting their docs. So I had this at hand. And as a part of the bootstrap phase, they also run pre-publish and prepare live scripts. So not pack. So what I think is that this kind of behavior, if not entirely just satisfied by the workspaces filtering, running subcommands, it would be nice to also try out with external tooling from the community so that we can like actually collect feedback before really going for something as fundamental, like of a change, like a protocol. But yeah, that's pretty much it.
Do you have a feeling on with, especially with all the arborist work, whether it would be simple, I say simple, whatever, relatively simple to bring back the a version of the behavior that is effectively what we're talking about here, which is actually copy the files over, right? And then apply all the hoisting logic and all the other magic that happens as if it was a registry spec?
Yeah, it doesn't sound like something technically hard to get, to achieve, but I don't really know, like in the more fundamentals of arborist, like if it is going to be a thing. And yeah, I'm not aware of the context of switching that behavior in the past. So I can definitely not speak much more about it, but internally to arborist, it should be something like just replacing the linking class we have right there now with like a copy, right? And then, yeah.
And one other thing that Pack would give you that we haven't talked about yet is it would apply all the logic for like npm ignore and all the files include stuff. I can't imagine you would use that in this context heavily, but still it would be, it would give you a reproducible, as if you then were going to go and publish it, you'd be able to test that, which has caught people off guard, especially lately, I think, which might lead into some of the like exports and right. Wasn't there a big thing recently that broke because somebody published with a bad?
Oh, right. The is promise package.
That sounds right. Yeah. So this kind of thing, if you were in a mono repo trying to test that, would give you the full behavior before you do your, full workspace publish.
Yeah, I agree. I also find like just as a testing tool, like I used a lot, like just packing and installing from a tarball, like it's way more reliable to the actual thing you're gonna get at the end, right? The actual result.
Miles, you have your hand up. Would you like to add?
Yeah, I think just speaking really quickly, Wes, to what you were talking about there, this is a little tangential, so we don't need to dig in. But something I'm interested in exploring as well is like what kind of pre-publish validations might be able to be done on both the client and the server. The is promise failure, for example, would not have been able to be published if there was like a validation of the exports map. There's also like a historic bug that I love that in particular Substack used to get hit by all the time because of like race conditions in the CLI client that only were observable on like a really, really old PC that he used to publish from, where like periodically index.js would just not end up in the tarball. Now, I'm not saying that this is happening anymore, but like I think that there are some really basic validations that can be done, such as like, what does main point to? Does that file exist in the tarball? Like even just that as like a publish validation is like one of those things that could probably stop a whole slew of different publication errors that I've seen kind of be very disruptive to the ecosystem before.
So one quick note on that, and then David, I see you have your hand up. I know that npm Doctor was supposed to, and I'm not sure how many people actually use that, but was supposed to help with like, I think help with running a whole bunch of tests against your environment and your package. So I'm not sure if that's like, we can extend upon that and or like you're saying, Miles, like add sanity level validation to pack. David, would you like to add?
Yeah, sure. I wanted to go back one moment to what was mentioned about changing the behavior where we, instead of linking, we just copy the files over to the actual tree of node modules that we will have. And I think I'm speaking on behalf of Isaacs. He mentioned that we should probably just do this once. So when we install the first time, we just copy all the files over to the tree. But what if we want to rebuild it? Do we have to do maybe some kind of switch? So when we want to install, we just say, okay, rebuild links or rebuild local packages, something like that. So, or is it something that you will guys see that like it's done every time that you run an npm install again in the root package?
So this was the workflow we basically used when we were relying on these file protocols. Well, sorry, I'm outside. That was a taco truck. Anyway, so we had a separate link. I think it was using back in the day. I think it was called npm link local, if I remember correctly. And then it would replace all of the file dependencies with links when we were working on them. And I think we had like a special filter that we could link. We used the same package, but it would only link the ones you were working on at the time. It was not a great developer experience, but it since the way we had it structured, you weren't regularly, or you weren't always, it was maybe 50-50 when you were working on application logic versus common library logic. So at least 50% of the time, the developers on that team were just running, the normal npm install and then never touching any of the workspace dependencies. And so it worked really well in that regard for them to just, when they knew that they were going to be working on one of the dependencies, they would just link it in, independently. So that sort of would solve that, right? Because you'd have the behavior that you want when you're not working on them, which is give me the full tree, right? Deduped and hoisted and everything. But when you want to go into the I'm going to work on it and rebuild, you do a separate command.
Yes, exactly. I think that's a good idea.
Okay, is there, just to be mindful of time here, and I've, folks have noticed I've actually re-added Orda's RC next, and to make sure it doesn't go last, as has been tradition, unfortunately. Is there any initial next steps that we can provide, or maybe give some more context around the other, I know we're going to talk about subcommands here as well, but in terms of like adding some feedback to this specific RFC?
I saw, I just read also from some of the Isaac's comment in the original issue. It's not linked back to the RFC, unfortunately, so it took me a while to read those. But yeah, he's particularly interested in like having this outside of workspaces, right? Like I mentioned, like we've been doing this ourselves all this time, right? As a reliable way to test a package before publishing. So yeah, it seems that there is appetite from Isaac's side to actually explore a protocol kind of thing. So it would be awesome to collect feedback on the RFC itself. Yeah.
That's good. So we'll leave it on the agenda, and then we can discuss it again next week or async in between that. David, did you have anything you want to add before we move on? Your hand's still up.
No, not really. I'm very glad that we discussed this and that people are actually looking forward to having something like this. Like we are not crazy. We are all doing the same all around. So totally. Thank you very much.
No problem. So our next item on the agenda is 126. So just added this again, adding file types to package.json in the registry. Orda, I apologize that we haven't been able to give you enough time. So hopefully now is good. Would you like to give us a quick update on the RC and maybe some of the work that you've been doing async?
Sure. So the RFC is at a point now where I think it's basically ready to merge. So we have a pretty formalized way of sort of what the data should look like in the registry, what the edge cases for like TypeScript versus Flow, and any potential future of a type system that could be added to JavaScript. And at this point, I started looking at what does it take to actually do this work, and was talking with Mail over at Yarn because I figured I'd have to implement it everywhere. And he let me know that like a lot of the sort of like the document private fields are all added on the registry side and not on client side. And so I assumed that I was going to go and add all that client side, but that means that I can't go and do the work to go and add all the actual JSON to it if it's all done on the registry, which was not a goal of mine. My goal was to try and do it all myself, so then it would just get done. So that actually does put a little bit of a question mark on this. It would have to go on someone's on NPM team's roadmap basically to get it done. But so I would say it as it is now. It's non-controversial and basically ready to go. But now it requires actually getting put on someone's roadmap because I don't know if I can do it myself.
Yeah, so what I might do, I just removed the label needs discussion. I think we've been talking about quite a bit, and I know you've put a lot of work into it. It's definitely, to your point about actually changing the document shape, like that is on the registry team usually to write the code to actually ensure that something gets like essentially privileged. Because there, as you know, there's lots of things in folks package JSON. So when we don't map everything one-to-one, and there's also a more slimmed down version of documents called corgi docs, you know, so like little dogs, corgi docs. Very cute. That also would go into that. So just we can, I think, flag this as a registry or put a label on it registry. Ideally, get somebody from that side. Gonna guess Ed Thompson, who's been also starting to join these calls, is the new product manager as well for NPM from GitHub. Might be good to just have him join and that conversation and get a sign off and make sure that we can get backlogged and then give you maybe a timeline. I know that there's been a bit of sort of scheduling, some blockers for scheduling net new work for that team. But yeah, Jordan, did you have anything you wanted to ask?
Yeah, so I'm just looking through the RFC for the type stuff. And so something that I would say that I consider a mistake from early Node days is treating paths in package JSON that start with letters as being relative to the package root. And we corrected that for the exports field, for example. So you have to use /. There's two reasons for that. One is that it makes it unambiguous. By requiring that it start with a dot, you can prevent absolute paths that start with a / as well. So you can kind of sidestep that issue. But then it also leaves open the ability to add name of a package. So one of the things I thought we'd talked about was being able to say that my package has types and its types are in a different package. And that might be my corporate mega types package, or that might be a definitely typed package or whatever. But so like the current RFC PR looks like it just has a single path that doesn't start with a dot and thus precludes it being a different package identifier.
Yeah. That's a really good idea. I will totally change it to make it look like that.
Awesome.
Thank you.
So that was going to be my question was, it doesn't mention the other use case, which is the one that I think we needed for Express, right? Which is the, these aren't in ours, they're indefinitely typed. Is that something we want to call out?
I mean, yeah, we can do. There's not support in TypeScript for that yet, but in part because it treats those the strings in there as the same as it would an index or the main, wherein it won't instinctively look for a package if there's nothing there. But maybe it can special case that types anyway in the compiler. That seems pretty reasonable as a thing.
Yeah, I can't remember. Daniel brought up some concerns with this in the issue I think you opened over on the TypeScript repo, and I haven't had a chance to follow up. Was there no interest in TypeScript implementing that feature?
I think he thought about it from the perspective of like, it's metadata that we can effectively ignore on TypeScript's side. Because if we can't resolve to it, then it will automatically try and look at types anyway.
Sure, but that then excludes.
In fact, it may even look at types first.
Right, that excludes you to definitely type though, right? So if we wanted to, like Jordan was saying, provide at corp megatypes, right? Which had all of our, our custom things, and maybe it includes some open source ones that were missing types. We don't support that today.
Yeah, so I still think that's I think that's still a good fight. At least I would push for it internally too. So I'll find out his opinion in the issue. But I think that seems totally reasonable.
So just to summarize that, it sounds like there's a couple of changes to this that we want to make, and I appreciate, Jordan, I saw your comment just on the actual RFC itself. Yeah, if we could clean that up, we might be able to do something async. I know this has been in the wild for a while, so yeah. And like I said, I'll also take an action item, or we should make a note that I'll take the action item also to try to bring somebody from the registry side to the conversation, just to make sure it gets actually backlogged.
And to be clear, I wasn't trying to say I think that the feature should wait on supporting a var identifier pointing to a package. I was saying that if you restrict the design space to only supporting starts with a /, then you leave that open for a future RFC, and you can unblock your common case of a relative file in the package. That's up to y'all to figure out what's the best path, but like I have zero concerns about doing it in multiple steps.
Awesome.
Cool.
It looks like David needs to drop. Thank you so much for joining and talking through the file protocol. Awesome. Cool. Is it okay to move along then with that in mind, Orta? Cool. So the next item in the agenda is RFC number 129. This is the overrides RFC. I notice, and just for to be mindful, I see that Sultan of PMPM made some comments in the RFC itself a couple days ago, and Isaac's actually on vacation at the moment, so it's reasonable that he isn't jumping on the call today. But notice there was some updates there, just basically around the shape and potentially changing the design. Did anybody on the call have a chance to look at those comments, want to add anything? If not, we can.
Can we summarize this as saying what he wants is the ability to specify dependency type, not just dependency spec? Like, so it's only override this if it's under dependencies or under peer dependencies. That's sort of what.
I think that's a good summary, Wes. Yeah, that seems to be what a little bit more powerful, or a little bit more, as you say, like a distinction between the.
Why not dev deps?
I think this was it wasn't a full spec change. It was just like, oh, could you do optional deps? I was just something Sultan added.
Yeah, I assumed he meant that it would support all of the dep types. It's just he didn't write it out. That's my guess.
Yeah. It was just an example of like, could we do this and scope the overrides to the types of deps? Did you have any?
Yeah, so I've been messing around with some of this stuff, and I've actually found some cases where I get some pretty unexpected behaviors if I'm putting things in weird places. So if you have something in like prod and dev and they specify different versions, there's different behavior than if you have it with peer. And like, I haven't written out test cases for everything yet, but it might be worth discussing what the use cases are for supporting the same dep in multiple blocks anyway. There are certain ones that are really good, and I'm not saying there aren't, but I'm just saying there's some that don't make any sense, and almost I can't imagine them ever making sense, right? Like you just, and they don't even resolve. The tree doesn't respect it, right? So if you put Lodash in prod deps at 1.0 and Lodash in dev deps in 2.0, like you can't unless you aliased it, you can't install that anyway. So like, what's the point in supporting that. So if we can figure out which combinations actually make sense, then it might give a little bit of illumination on what we would want to support and overrides there. Because again, optional and dependencies doesn't make sense. And that's his example, right? Like if you put it as dependencies, it's good. It's not optional anymore. It's a dependency, right?
Yeah, it's a good point. Yeah.
Yeah. Interesting.
But yeah. Wes, if you want to look back, I think it's fair to just leave this RFC open for a while and collect more feedback. I know that there's this ongoing discussion between as a consultant there already, so I think it's fair to maybe just give it more time.
I think also on that note, and unfortunately Solon's not here to speak to this, but is this something that we could potentially support in an iteration of overrides? Is essentially scoping, like being able to do the initial work, or would this
it would
the way
special
that
case
it's
all the
designed
strings, right?
Yeah,
So you can't have a dependency named dependencies, can you?
right. Or optional dependencies or dev dependencies. I wonder if we even allow that today, or if we're squatting on those.
No, it's not.
The camel case ones, you can't make a package named that, but dependencies, I think you could.
Last published 8
theoretically.
years ago, but it gets 1,465 weekly downloads.
Wow.
So
okay, feels like the at alias all over again. Okay, I think that just to allow Isaac and Zoltan to jump on the call, probably also to bring this up. If folks feel like they want to add any comments to the RFC itself, again, that was 129. Definitely jump in there if you have thoughts. Just to be mindful of time, we have about 13 minutes left. I know we have about 3 items left. So if we can try to spend 3 to 4 minutes max on each of the next 3, that'd be great. Oh, Roy, did you just pull one out, or did I just do that?
The duplicate, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it was the types again. Sorry.
Okay, great. So we only have 2 left. And so the next item in our agenda, 117, RFC npm workspaces running commands. Roy, did you want to give a quick update on where you're at with that and the updates you made since last week?
Yeah, I guess the update, the action item we had was to create a poll, right? So I went ahead and created. So maybe we want to just take the time to advertise it a little bit more. But it's basically to collect, just casual collect community like sentiment on what spell they want to filter out workspaces when running subcommands in them.
And that issue is issue 160 on the RFC's repo is the poll. I'll link it here in the chat. I think it's
exactly.
good. I think it's good to maybe keep it open during the summit next week as well, and we can try to promote that there. It would probably be good to, yeah. Good to try to get like more user feedback on those polls that we're generating.
You mean you don't think 12 votes is a representative sample?
Yeah. I do. No. That's good data, right? Like that's enough to make sense. Not based on like usage and installs and etc. So did anybody have any feedback on that, or what you want to?
I think well, the other action item I had was to try to document all the commands that we want to support, make sure we're not. I think Tierney pointed out some we were missing last time, so that I haven't got to yet. But I know Jordan left a comment on basically the ability of like globbing like along with the flag, and I haven't replied yet, but I'd like to discuss, because that's the other aspect of the RFC, providing a way to basically create like groups or alias of a set of workspaces that you can kind of predefine. So instead of using blobs, you would point to these alias, to these groups, and you would invoke the flag with those instead.
But hopefully those groups would also support globs. Like if I have Like I'm thinking
Yeah.
of the few monorepos I work with, and like Enzyme has 8 enzyme dash adapter dash whatevers. I don't want to have to type all those out and add one to the list every time I publish. Every time React adds a new minor. So so there has to be globs somewhere, and it seems like in general, I kind of it always feels frictiony and weird when something that's supported in config isn't supported in a CLI argument, and vice versa. I don't think NPM's axiom of they're always the same necessarily has to apply, but in general, like it's nice when there's parity. So it seems useful to me to be able to define the groups in package JSON with globs and then use the group aliases, because that's simple. But then ideally on the fly, I'd be able to still define a custom group like with a glob on the command line.
Yeah. So I think, that's a great point. I think we should definitely add along with the workspaces filter flag, also add one for providing the groups as you're typing, right? And then you can select that group just to have that parity.
Yeah, and I would expect the group definition to be the same schema as the filter flag. In other words, a group is a predefined filter. A filter is, and then the relationship between those things is clear, and like it would feel less to understand to me and to educate as well, because like it's just whatever you're running on the command line with dash filter. Oh, you're typing that a lot. Make it a group, and then you don't have to type it as much, but it's the same. You just move it from the CLI to the package JSON.
Yeah. And I think having them as a group, like usually, at least from my experience, when you have a collaborative workspaces, you're working with other people, you want to share this kind of like, you're always going, like most of the time you're going to be running these against the same set of workspaces. So it's like to have them in the package JSON as a way to share with the rest of the team, right?
Well, and that's why the parity is nice between, I've been using npx on the command line. Now I want other people to be able to use the same command. Now I take the part after npx, and that's an npm run script, right? Like it's nice that there's a parity there.
Yeah.
And so it'd be nice to have it between groups and filters.
Okay, yeah. I'm gonna write a comment in the RFC so that I can remember to update.
Don't lose track of that, yeah. Is there any other update there other than the poll as well, Roy?
No, that will be all.
Awesome. So moving along, the last item I think we had on the agenda is PR number 18, npm audit resolve. So I think we spoke about this last week. I'm not sure if there's been activity.
we haven't heard back from ZB, right? He mentioned he would like to still be engaged and rewrite that RFC, or even like write a new one, right? Seeing that that's such a outdated one, and we discussed like fundamental changes in it. So we kind of left it open to him, like if he wants to just update this one and we can like kind of follow along, or if he wants to kind of actually write a new one to exclude all the mentions to interactivity. But yeah, that said, I don't think he had the time to look back yet. Yeah, and I feel like we're probably not going to be picking this one up because our backlog is already full.
It might be good.
Go ahead.
No, go ahead, Wes.
I was just going to add, I'm working in a similar space right now internally. My hope is to build something that we think is open sourceable. Seems to be now. So if you're putting this, I would much rather use your stuff than build my own. But does it sound like that would be, NPM 8 anyway, or like what's the story?
No, we were planning minor, right? We were planning this definitely for a minor version of 7. So
well,
I think,
it might depend on how it's implemented. So because overrides and any audit resolution type, like anything that would change those, either subcommands or the installation process, we have to be mindful. But and this is something we're talking about internally, and now also with Miles coming on board with GitHub, we're a lot more mindful and need to be a lot more mindful with sort of our window here for getting at least 7 into the next, or being way more mindful about just, how we're versioning in general. So I'm personally not, I'm not attached to majors. Like I from a decade's experience with back in the day with jQuery, when they stopped considering major versions blessed and needed to be packed full of features, I think that we should be a lot more aggressive with that. So I think this might not ship in a minor, depending on how like an audit.json or resolutions.json or whatever the name of the package would be, or the config would be, how that would be applied against install would be interesting.
Yeah, it's just that overall, going back to the audit resolve itself, at least the scope of the feature we've been discussing with ZB there is totally an incremental, like there's no breaking change or anything to the CLI itself, right?
Yeah, so I think well, it would change essentially what resolutions would get get noisy on install. So if you had I think, now again, this is where I think we can probably move this discussion to a later date, because right now the RFC is still tied to the interactive piece along with like the schema itself. Whereas like we've asked, I think, for those to be split up so that we can look at just what it would mean to support like a resolutions JSON or yeah, like a resolve.json or audit resolve JSON file. But I do think that the idea would be to reduce the noise of meaningless like audit notices during install. So that would change, that supporting that would be probably a break and change.
But it's an incremental thing because it depends, it relies on you having this new file, which will be audit JSON. That's definitely like up to like chatting, but it needs to have that file declared. And like in an incremental version of the CLI, it could read from it and filter out audit results based on that. But if you don't have this file, if you're not using it, it is.
I think if you have this file today and you updated, you had a file called audit.json or resolutions.json or whatever the file name was, because I think it was up for debate, or if it was added, support was added into package.json for some privileged key. If you were using that today and then just in a minor version, and you were using it in a different way than is the intention of how we're going to support it, and then something breaks or something changes about npm install because of that, and we didn't ship it in a major, would be probably the reason why we might want to consider it to be npm.
Yeah, I see your point. I think from a technical point of view, there might be ways to avoid that. Like, but one thing I would like to note before the meeting is over is if Wes really wants to maybe pick this up, it could be nice to maybe coordinate with the original author and see if they're just like okay with you picking it up.
Yeah. So what I would like to do is show a alternative approach that is more of a proof of concept. It would be more like how you reference Lerna for workspaces than necessarily start that conversation off straight in how this looks in NPM. I have reasons for that. Don't need to, go into them on here. So I'm not ready to say pick that up, but I definitely have opinions on why I think that's a little bit short-sighted, which, it's 1 minute left, so I don't want to stand on a pedestal and take the end. So if the conversation picks back up again and it looks like they're going to champion it, then I'll happily come in and try to share my feedback. But it's a long conversation already, and if hasn't moved forward recently, I didn't want to make comments that weren't super valuable to them.
Appreciate that.
Sounds fair.
Just a quick note there, though. I think that ZB actually did do or create some tooling around this. So if you're looking at, just want to make sure you don't like recreate the wheel, or if there is a way to get time with you to pick this up, that'd be great, if it makes sense.
That's a good point. I think I looked at his tool the last time we were on the call and talked about it, but then I think I dropped the ball. So that's a good point. I'll reinvestigate that.
Sure, because if it means that we can modify what's already there, and then potentially we have a PR, like something to look at, actual functionality and how it would get applied to our new world, that'd be great. So that was the last item. I had a couple action items on here for my personal notes, in terms of things that need to be cleaned up, and there's a number of items that we haven't got to over time, which include ensuring that there's a review done of existing accepted RFCs that have not been implemented yet, and whether or not we can give some sort of status on those to provide feedback to the people that put work into that, and whether or not we're going to withdraw essentially support or acceptance of those based on the fact that we now have sort of a process outlined. But yeah, I think that's it. Did anybody else have anything they want to add, or no?
One thing, I think we should definitely add Jordan's PR to the agenda.
Right. I apologize,
Jordan,
we didn't get
Yeah,
that.
and I actually have to drop too, but it's a tiny PR. So the summary is that adding the exports field is a breaking change. So unless you're like really verbose and careful, and you can always expand it. So like my advice would be to essentially add my PR to v700. And then if you find that there's more things you need to expose, you can very easily, as a patch or a minor, expose them later, but you can't tighten it back later. So
this will be a good item. We're not under tight pressure to ship the beta for 7 just yet, but cool. Let's definitely queue that up for discussions next week, actually. So
cool. Sounds great. Thanks.
Awesome.
Great.
I appreciate everybody jumping on today, and hopefully I'll see you all at Summit and OpenJS World next week. Ciao.
All right. Bye-bye.
Everyone.